So I jump on Twitter this morning and I see that Dan Raphael's reporting that Ryan Garcia's B sample came back and basically it's the same as the A sample, right? They found the Ostarine in it. And that's really a surprise to nobody, right? There's extremely rare cases when the B sample comes back and it's different than the A sample. And usually that's the type of scenario where you're dealing with like a chain of custody issue or a contamination issue or something along those lines. Nobody really expected that to be the case here. Everybody looked at this one and everybody expected the B sample to come back just like we expected with the A. Lo and behold, that's what we see. Now, here's the thing. When you look at Ostarine, it's either like it's like a light switch, right? On or off, in the sense that it's either in your system or it isn't. Your body is not supposed to have it in there at all. It's on the ban list. So if we find it in your system, you're automatic. That's it. You're dirty. Positive test. Done for in that regard, right? There's no debate about that. If it's in your system, it's not supposed to be in your system. Done for. So in that regard, it seems pretty obvious. It's in the man's system. He's going to get found. Or he's going to end up getting found guilty. I imagine they're going to schedule a hearing somewhere down the line, probably sometime in June, hopefully, and he'll get some kind of punishment for it. Great, I understand that. Okay. But then there's another aspect to it. And that aspect is, was it actually used as a performance-enhancing drug? Right, I'll put it that way. And I'm certainly not an expert on the matter, but one of the guys that I love checking out about this is Derek from More Plates, More Dates, right? Awesome channel. If you haven't heard of him, please go on, check it out. You can listen to this dude for anything regarding I don't know, I'll just use the blanket term of steroids. Obviously, it's way more detailed than that. Even this drug that we're talking about here, Ostarine, in and of itself, I don't think it would be classified as a steroid. I think it'd be classified as a SARM. So I was listening to him, and one of the things that he said about it was, it's not an FDA-regulated drug, but it's out there in the pipeline, and one of the things that it's used for, it's potentially used for, what they're seeing results for it of, is exactly one of the things that you would think would be awesome for boxing. Particularly when you're thinking about weight cutting, in the sense that it's going to keep on muscle mass while you're dropping this weight. Okay, great, we understand all that. But how much do you need in your body for it to actually have that positive result? And one of the things that he was mentioning was that you're going to need a very large amount, right? He's thinking that you would possibly need 10 milligrams, 11 milligrams, something along those lines. That's not the amount that Ryan Garcia tested positive for. He tested positive for a much lower amount. And one of the things that his team released today was a letter, and I'll post the letter up here, but I'll paraphrase it. One of the things that his team came out today and said is we're going to start testing all of the supplements that Ryan was taking. And we're going to try to find where this thing was in one of these supplements, right? So you can see right now he's going to go with the tainted supplement defense. And we've seen this before. We've seen it all kinds of times in the past. One of the organizations that we've seen it the most prominent recently, I want to say in the UFC, we've seen a couple guys do it. The first guy that comes to my head is Yoel Romero. He ended up popping dirty for something or another, and he goes back and he provides, and what they do is he provides the substance that he was taking. And he says, hey, here's all the stuff that I was taking tested. They test it. They find the level in that substance, right? So this is the one that came from Yoel Romero, right? Or the athlete would provide it themselves. It gets tested. They find it. At that point, what the organization is supposed to do is go out and purchase that same product off the shelf in the stores from multiple locations and then test those products. And if the level comes back and they also find it in there, at that point they can say it was a contaminated supplement versus you specifically going out and intentionally trying to take this banned supplement. Okay, and I get that. And that may be what we're dealing with here. Honestly, truly, that really may be what we're dealing with here. I know that it sounds crazy in the sense that anytime you see somebody doing something like this, you're talking about a professional athlete with all the money on the line, and it would have been belts if he didn't come in at 143, but you're talking about all the money on the line and the fame and the prestige and everything else and follow-up fights and rematches and blah, blah, blah. It's hard to believe that in a situation like that, you're going to have somebody come up as cheating, right, or as dirty in a scenario. It's going to indicate that what they were doing was helping them achieve that goal of everything. And then we're going to turn around and say, it wasn't intentional. He didn't really do it on purpose. But dude, if we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to follow the science, we have to really, truly look at that as a very real possibility. Because here's the thing. Going back to Derek, More Plates, More Dates. One of the things he said is these SARMs, they're incredibly easy to detect. Incredibly easy to detect, right? Particularly at levels that you would need to have for performance enhancement. So if you're dealing with something that's incredibly easy to detect, we didn't find it in any of the urine samples leading up to the fight. It was just the ones that were before the fight, like the day before, April 19th, and the day after on the fight, April 20th, taken post-fight. So you're indicating it wasn't there before. When we did find it, it's not in a quantity that's going to indicate performance enhancing. If they do out and run these tests and they find this, that it's in some supplement, and it's not far-fetched at all for that to be the case, right? One of the things that he posted on Twitter, in a picture that Ryan Garcia himself posted on Twitter, shows that he's taking stuff with a proprietary blend. So it could absolutely be in there, or any other kinds of things that he's taking. And if they find it in there, they find all kinds of stuff in there, right? Because if you find where these labs are coming from, there's all kinds of tainted supplements and things like that. Why is that not a plausible option? Why is that not a real possibility if all of the numbers match up? Now look, let's just say that that's the case. Let's just assume that that's really the truth, that he went out there and he didn't mean to take it and it's a tainted supplement, but it still ended up in his system and it was not in his system at performance enhancement levels. In my opinion, it doesn't matter in the sense that he should be punished for it, right? Because that should be really black or white in the sense that if it's in your system and it's not supposed to be in your system, you need to be punished for it. And that's really to prevent future use or future abuse or future people trying to manipulate the system or people trying to find loopholes. Because if they go out here and they try and run through all this and then they give Ryan Garcia just a really tiny slap on the wrist for it, how are future people going to look at that? How are people who are really truly have bad intentions or have ill intentions, right? People who are really truly trying to manipulate the system, cheat, trying to give an unfair advantage. How are they going to look at that ruling? And what do you think that they're going to do about it in the future? Right? So it's a crazy scenario in that regard, and it's because of that I have some criticism about all these people out there, particularly a lot of people who are actually involved in the fight game themselves, right? We're talking about former fighters or managers or trainers or things like that. But there's been a whole range of people since this thing started coming out saying it's not really that big of a deal. I don't really care. I just care about who won the fight. It doesn't change the outcome of the fight. I don't know, man. I don't know. On the one hand, if we're looking at it now and we're saying that the supplement or whatever, the chemical, whatever you want to call it, this Ostarine, if this was taken at a level that was below performance enhancement levels, if we can look at it and we can find the concentration of it in his urine or in his blood or whatever it was, and we can determine that it was far below anything that would have given him any advantage, then I can understand that statement. These guys were making that statement prior to this kind of information being released. But if that's the case, then I can understand that statement. You go out, you take something and it has no measurable effect on you, then yeah, it doesn't really change the outcome of anything. However, if it was determined that you were taking something at that level, how are you not going to care about that, man? How are you going to turn around and say that doesn't matter? How are you going to turn around and say that the outcome of the fight is not in question? And I'm not talking about whether it's changed to a no contest or not. I'm talking about the outcome of the fight in the sense that how we look at it as the fans, how we look at it from a legacy perspective, how we remember this thing. How are you going to, that'd be like looking at that fight with Antonio Margarito against Miguel Cotto, the first one, and not casting suspicion on that, not being weary, not having the crazy eye and being like, yeah, I think there was a very high probability that he had the loaded gloves. Why? We saw what happened in the fight with Shane Mosley. We saw what happened in the locker room. They're taping the hands, and Nazeem Richardson goes out there and he finds that the wraps are being tampered with. Right? We saw about the ban for life and to the trainer and all this kind of stuff. We saw that. So obviously when we look back at the fight with Cotto, it's very reasonable for us to believe that there was a little something going on there. Okay? You can see how that makes sense. You have to hold people accountable. So I don't know. At the end of the day, how is it that you guys feel about this? How is it that you look at this? When you sit back and you think, if it seems pretty clear cut in the sense that a few things. One, if it's in his system that he should be held accountable. And two, if it was in his system and it was above or at, performance enhancing levels, then it's pretty obvious that the whole thing is just, it's got the whole performance, the fight, everything else, it's got this incredibly dark cloud over it is from Ryan Garcia's perspective. But we know that it's in his system that's kind of clear cut. But what about it being under the levels? Let's say it comes back. We clearly determine that this is under the performance enhancing levels. How is it that you're going to feel about that? Are you still going to look at that performance the same way you did fight night, as just some phenomenal performance, one fighter against another, evenly matched, fair playing field, and Ryan Garcia was just a better man that night? Or would that positive test, even though it was below them levels, would that positive test skew the way that you looked at it and would it change the way that you viewed that fight? Let me know what you guys think.